I just thought I would give you just a quick snapshot of who I am, and I won't go that much into Avon. It is an interesting company, 140-something countries, well over $10 billion today with 6 million Avon representatives. So I think we have more Avon representatives than the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy combined in Brazil, and over 1.1 million in China. So the numbers are huge. But let me just tell you one thing about myself, which I think will start this, and that is that I think I'm in this job 10 years as of last Wednesday, 10 years as the CEO, which my father, he sent me an article, he usually doesn't do this, that had on the cover of Business Week that the average tenure was at that time 3.2 years. And he sent it to me with this big question mark, like, are you coming home after this? What are you doing after this? And I would say to you, first and foremost, that I have a love affair with my work and my company. Not loved this job every single day, which we can talk about. The CEO's job after 40 public quarters, and particularly in the last couple of years, is not exactly what I would say is fun. But I have had a huge passion for it, and I guess I would just express this by telling you that in 1997, I was on a short list of, I guess, potential CEOs for the company. And there was a lot of visibility on it for those of you who are women in the audience, because I think at that time there was only one woman, maybe two. Carly Fiorina and Marion Sandler were the only two public company CEOs at the time. And so I was in line to become the CEO of the company. Company hit a sort of tough spot, and the board decided, even though they had kind of given me the nod that I would get the job, that they were going to go with one of our directors, a gentleman who had been a CEO and was 52 years old. So they told me that I was not going to get the job, and that I could be the number two. And the papers and the New York Times kind of really were all over that, because there was this whole overwhelming women passed over, there is a glass ceiling reaction to it. At which point I got actually two other pretty big CEO job offers. So I was at this inflection point, because there I was, the boss that I was going to work for was 52, so it wasn't like he was 62, or they could tell me, just do this for a couple years and then you'll get the job. And they basically were saying, he's here, you're here to support him. And I was being offered the money, the title, the corner office that came with some pretty interesting benefits. And a mentor of mine said, follow your compass, not your clock. And I'd say that again. She said, follow your compass, not your clock. Make this decision not from your head, but from your heart. And that was the biggest inflection point of my career. I made the decision that I loved the company. I loved its mission, its purpose. We were in a tough time. I loved the people. And I decided that I loved that more than I loved the idea of being a CEO or anything else that came with that. That I would rather be with the company and work I loved than just do it for the sake of the title and, quote, the path that you were supposed to be achieving. And in that decision, I think that changed my life. It changed my life career-wise. I will tell you, it didn't work out for him. So I got the job in 21 months, and the rest is history. But I'm starting to tell you, because I don't know who else would be here on View for the Top, because I would make that decision again, even if I were still number two today. Other things take precedence when it's not deep passion for the work. So that's the first thing I wanted to tell you, is that luckily life turned out for me, and I get to be here and do this, but it wouldn't have mattered if it didn't, because I've actually found a company that I love, and that's my most important thing I wanted to share with you before we even started.
Starting back then, how did you manage to stay true to your passion and your dreams?
Well, it was interesting, because, Mom and Dad came from China, came here to give us educations, and hopefully, Ivy League educations, and then going into, not different than your parents, doctor, lawyer, just something they thought more intellectual than retail. So when I decided after Henry here recruited me to go and work in the retail business, I think their first reaction was that really wasn't what we had in mind. But then the family values set in, which were no matter what it is you do, then you better go and be your best. You better go and you better work hard. And I remember, oh gosh, it was just by Thanksgiving of that first year in that training program, and I was changing hangers in a stockroom. And all I was doing was taking the vendor hangers. Why are you laughing? It was worth it. I'm being very nice about this. I was taking the vendor hangers and putting the store hangers on this, thinking to myself, I got a Princeton education to do this. And I remember one day saying to my mom, I don't know. I mean, it could be really interesting, but I really feel like I'm doing some menial work here, and I don't know. Maybe I should quit. And she said to me, it took less than a heartbeat. She said to me, "Quit? We don't quit in this family. Are you kidding? Quit. You start at the bottom and you work your way up. What is it that you are learning from that? You are not quitting. I don't care who else is in that training program that's quitting. We don't quit on anything in this family." And that perseverance, even though when they quickly got over it, now they think it was great. They tell the stories. They have all the scrapbooks about it, but that wasn't like that in the beginning. But that thought really was resonant in I think, our family's culture. So it was just whatever you decide to do, stick with it. It's not going to be easy. No path to success comes without stones in it. So you're going to have to take some tough days. You're not going to like it a lot of the time, but that's just part of it. Stick with it. Don't quit. I feel really proud that I haven't had to change who I am to be successful in this role. Dan Rather was doing this series of interviews when I first became the CEO of a couple of women executives. And he went and interviewed families, parents. And so they went up and interviewed my parents. My mom cleaned the house. They were trying to serve him Chinese food. And they do this huge thing for like hours and hours. And you know how, well, those of you who know media, I mean, they trunk it down to about a 20-second soundbite after interviewing for hours and hours and hours. With all of this, they take it down to one soundbite on television where he's asking my father, so did you always know that your daughter was going to be a successful CEO? And he says on public television, as a matter of fact, quite the opposite. We raised our kids as pretty traditional Chinese family values, and my perception of CEOs, really hardcore, cutthroat. I really can't imagine that she's going to actually be that successful. I'm thinking, this is public TV. So, but the truth is, in that thought, was the fear, I think, that my family value system had, that the concept of being kind, about caring about people, about being respectful, would get washed out of the window in a very, very, in his mind, typical behaviors required in the corner office. And have I had to change some things? Yes. I mean, I think I am much more assertive. I mean, kind of growing up in an Asian background, sort of avoid conflict around the dinner table is the thought. You don't argue about things. And I have had to become more assertive and understand the role of constructive conflict. I don't think I'm aggressive.
Got 5.5 million sales representatives around the world. How does that play into how you motivate them, how you get them inspired, and how you lead the organization?
Well, it's interesting because they are independent representatives. So I underline that word. I mean, it's different than, I guess, other CEOs. They're not my employees. They don't have to work for me every day. So I can't tell them what to do. You learn, and the skill is an interesting one, and I guess it applies anywhere, whether I guess it's politics or anything else. I mean, influence is a very different thing. Motivation, inspiration, and influence are very different things than leadership requirements and mandates. And so, this skill of communicating is the skill of influencing and inspiring. And mission and values and purpose have been the way that we've effectively kept that sales force going. This year, you and I had a little conversation on the way over, but no different than any other company. 2009, you go into the buzzsaw of the global economic crisis a year ago, and everybody's like, okay, we got to cut, we've got to freeze salaries, we're not going to hire, we're going to do whatever, all the things that just come flying at you as a CEO. And we decided that we needed to keep our people motivated, but more importantly, go back to the original purpose of the company in order to find the answer for the way we were going to get through this year. And that was that the company is 123 years old, and the founder actually was a man who believed that women should be economically empowered. I mean, I actually love the story. He was a encyclopedia salesman, and all of the direct sellers were men at the time. And somebody gave him a vial of perfume one Christmas, and he realized everybody who was home were the women. And they were basically saying to him, we don't want the books. Can we just buy the perfume that you were supposed to give as a gift with it? So he realized there was something there. But the most important thing he did, because it was 1886, was decide that the seller wouldn't be men, that he was going to actually employ a woman, which was heretical at the time because women weren't even allowed to vote, never mind make money outside of the home. And it's been extremely motivating, and there's almost no language necessary when you have mission and purpose. We did a very bold thing. A lot of people were cutting back on advertising. We decided we're going to advertise. I remember the day I said, we're going to advertise on the Super Bowl this year. And people were like, the Super Bowl, A, it's expensive, B, it's Budweiser. I mean, those are the kind of products. So, Andrea, we're going to advertise skincare or lipstick. And I said, neither. We're going to create an ad, a testimonial ad of people who've joined us since they got laid off, and they're going to tell their story. Everybody just looked at us, and we went out and we created a very compelling ad where the message was authentic and genuine. People really said, I can't get laid off. I'm running my own business. They're my own hours. It's my own business, my job. And we ran it, and the phone was off the hook before halftime, as you can imagine, for all the women watching at the same time from the pregame on. And this began what has become probably more people who've joined than certainly in the United States since the 70s. It's been an amazing thing, but it was this proactive message that entrepreneurship is in, and it's important, and it's part of the economy solution.
I'm sure we'd all love to know kind of how you view your leadership style as being different from Steve Jobs' or Jeff Immelt. In particular, what you think Jeff and Jack before him and Steve
I was going to wear my
learned from
jeans
you.
and my black tie. But Mark told me I needed to wear a suit. Very different, fascinating experiences. So I was, in this day and age, tough to find the time, because I think boards take time. I mean, I think this is a world, and speaking for a second, just being a director, the responsibility of being a public company director obviously is huge these days, and the commitment really is time consuming. But I was on GE's board since actually before I became the CEO at Avon, so I've been on that board 11 years now, and was pretty much exclusively on one board until I joined Apple in 2008. So it was 10 years before I joined a second board. And I did that. I mean, GE has been extraordinary. It's, I didn't go to business school, my secret. I wish I had come here, but since I didn't go to business school. And in a way, it has been my business school. From everything of a process point of view. On one hand, you would say aircraft engines, power systems, medical systems, lipstick and skincare, completely different businesses. On the other hand, the processes, globalization, quality programs, how they do things across the world, as you know, are hugely beneficial to any business leader.
I just wondering if you'd speak a little bit about how you reinvent yourself as a CEO, and how do you take a step back, re-examine, and
Sure.
do something different?
Well, I think, the company, we like to say, is 123 years young, and the only way to do that, you can't reinvent a company without reinventing yourself first. So reinvention of a brand or reinvention of a company is only as good as the reinvention of the leader and the leaders. And it is interesting, being in the job 10 years, and yeah, it's a huge privilege on one hand. I actually don't know how people are kind of coming into this job in this environment and having to kind of put all truths over here and start fresh, having had a decade of having to go through cycles and reinvent myself and learn from my own mistakes, I think has clearly been an enabler to getting through this environment. But I'll tell you one story. So the first 5 years, I was a growth CEO. We were booming into emerging markets. We had double-digit top-line growth, 25% earnings growth for 5 years running, and I never did a layoff. I had no idea what the word turnaround meant, and we hit the wall, as all businesses do. And if you're in any job long enough, I can promise you there is a cycle. Whether it's their businesses are cyclical, whether it's pharma, you name it, there's always cycles. So I'd gone probably longer than not without hitting the wall, but we hit the wall in 2005, and we at that time gave earnings guidance, and we missed guidance twice in, 4 months. And I don't know if some of you know Ram Charan, who is sort of a coach and friend to CEOs. He's been a friend of mine for a long time, but he came up into my office on a Friday night, and he said to me, "You want some tough love?" And I said, "Sure." And he said to me, "The board loves you, and people in this company love you. But in about 120 days, they're going to have to fire you." I just looked at him and he said, "You do understand that, right? Unfortunately, when you're in this job, you got shareholders. If you can't turn this around, if you can't look at this thing with new eyes, it's going to kill them. But they're not going to have a choice." I said, well, that was pretty tough love." And he was right. Earlier that week, one of the people that worked for me said, "You know what, I've got these people that want to come in because when I was at AT&T, they had 15 layers of management, and they had this exercise which then became really very strategic, where they took out 30% of management and 7 or 8 layers because people were too far from the consumer and too far from the business, and they had built, as all businesses do, a bureaucracy. And so I think we should look at this." And I said, "Tell me a little bit more." And she said, "Well, probably 1 out of 3 middle to senior managers is going to have to go." And I said, "Look, we have all these initiatives, but we're really a people-based business. We're not capital-intensive, we're people-intensive. We have so many countries. The operating model is not mature enough yet or matrixed enough for us to take out the people. I understand the concept, but I don't think we can do that. I think that would take it. I don't think we have the capacity. I don't think we can do that." And that was Monday. So Friday night, he says to me, "If you think about this is what's going to happen, Andrea. So you're going to get fired if you don't turn this around. But then because you've got the history and the track record, Hydrix is going to call you, and they're going to put you into another company, and then you're going to be the turnaround CEO who gets to look at everything fresh. You won't know any of the people. You won't have any, allegiance to the strategies, and you're going to go in and be able to just cut, do, and change because you'll be objective. So you have to make a choice. Go home. It's Friday night. If you can't come in on Monday morning and reinvent yourself and pretend you just got hired here and you're going to look at everything, your team, your strategies, your organizational structure, and if you can't do the things that a turnaround person would do if they came in here Monday morning, I wouldn't put big bets on it. If you can, you will be far better than anybody else could, because you know where every rock is, you know every single thing about it, and you've got the latent goodwill and equity that you've built up. So you make the choice. So that's what I did. I went home and I thought about it, and I came in Monday morning, and we took out 8 layers. We had we went forward and reshaped. I had a very hard look at some people who were terrific friends, and got us from 3 billion to 6 billion, but weren't going to get us to 11. And I made all the hard calls with the right values, and the rest has been the last few years. But I had to become a definer of my own second chapter and start it afresh. So it's been like a new job.
You mentioned how you're able to motivate and inspire your own employees. You also mentioned how the lessons that you've learned from the other boards that you serve on. I'm wondering how you've been able to adjust your leadership style to motivate and inspire these more technology-based companies and these almost bigger-than-life personalities, these male leaders at those companies.
I think that the experiences that I've had at the company, as well as my own vantage point, has been a different and interesting addition to the boards that I've been on. The global experience, our business in China, for example, where we have direct touch consumer insights and understanding of, in our case, 1,000,001 sellers who have millions of consumers in all the small towns and villages. One of the things, I use that example, and I've spent a lot of time talking about that with Jeff Immelt or Steve, but we decided at Avon not to focus on the eastern seaboard cities, the large cities. We decided to penetrate the small towns and villages and have a supply chain and infrastructure strategy where the women were, because we knew that the government would like the fact that we were offering opportunities for people not to have to bus themselves to work into large cities, that we could create work for them right in the towns and villages where they were. And those insights and the behavior and the opportunity to understand consumers and what they will do and what they will pay in those countries, those are some of the insights I think I've been able to bring. Very different personalities, so two very different men and two very different corporate cultures. And ours is completely different too, and it is interesting to weigh and balance that. So again, even though Avon is different from either of those two couldn't be more different either, but both with enormous strengths. You're welcome.
Out of curiosity, do you feel there still is a glass ceiling? And if so, what do you think the next generation of leaders can do to change that?
That's a great question. I think the numbers by themselves would say there's still somewhat of a glass ceiling. 15 out of 500, I guess women on the Fortune 500 would say there's room to go. But having said that, I am a real believer that the playing field is changing. And what do I mean by that? When I go back even 5 years, never mind when I became the CEO, most women in, not the CEO job, but in the level underneath were in what I would call the staff jobs, corporate communications, HR. They were not in the CFO roles or the leading operating unit roles. If you look today, while the number may be small, in the level below of women ready to take on the number one job or in the important C jobs, the C-suite jobs, it's so dimensional that I think the next 5 years is going to be huge in terms of women in top leadership roles in business. So I think we are in a very, very different moment. Also, in terms of me, I keep saying, there's these lists, which I believe that when the lists go away of top whatever women, will really have made it. But right now, while there are still lists, I'm hoping that I keep going down. What do I mean by that? Because my company's big, but there are people in much bigger jobs now in the top, Fortune 50 companies, and so women are not only breaking through, but they're breaking through with some pretty big roles, which I think hopefully is true in politics, is in business. So I think it's the jobs and the companies they're leading, as well as the number of them who are ready to take on pretty large roles, very, very different than even 5 years ago. So I think the glass is very half full, more than half full on that front. So it's a different time, if women want it. I think that it's there to be had.
How have you stayed innovative in the consumer product space over the last 10 years? And especially kind of where the challenges and best practices in leading and guiding that innovation in the space?
That's a great question. How do I stay innovative, or how does one stay innovative? I think, you guys are probably learning this more than anyone, that innovation is so key. I think this is more important than ever. I think that the worst thing that can happen in this economy is for people to cut back R&D spend. I mean, if you kind of look at, I have studied that the actual market share gains and losses in normal or healthy economies, it's pretty hard when you're large to kind of get half a point of market share or a point. It takes a long time. And so in normal times it's hard, but in the worst economies, they say that that's when disruptive share gains or losses, when industries go out and companies can go from bottom quartile to completely top if they are on top of innovation. So really, I'm a huge believer that this is actually a seminal moment for companies to invest, and I think it's a combination of things. Look, one thing, and I believe this, is that there's a deal of instinct that's important in innovation. I think you can't always find it going back or in facts or analytics, or, I mean, if you have to have, I think, some art, the art of it and the instinct of it, as well as the science and facts, but the consumer herself or himself will tell you a good amount of the answer. I mean, you can be searching out there, but if you really listen and have the constant tentacles into, I find some of the biggest answers in the customer complaint area. If you go into your call center, your customer complaint area about your products and or services, right in there from what they don't like is the answer to what you can do. So it is just go in there, sit there, listen to the phone, pick it up. I've done that for a couple hours, every once in a while, and you can get a tremendous amount there.
I wonder if you could give us some information on how you divide your time and make sure you get these disciplines across your children and do the bang-up job at home as you do it at work.
Okay, well, my answer for this, which has evolved, is the following. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure there are some people who can get it all done in one day. I am not one of them. But I really believe two things. One is it's all about prioritization. There are days that my children absolutely win and the company does not. There are also days where the company has to win and they don't. And I think I've made the right choice with the right priority. So the days Avon lose, I don't feel guilty. If I'm not at a meeting, years ago I would not go to an Avon meeting and I would feel guilty about it the whole time. I don't do that anymore. My probably best example is, this time it was this couple of administrations ago, so it was George W. Bush, and they were inviting 8 CEOs to the White House. I was the only woman invited on a specific topic. And it was also the first day that my daughter was going away to a camp, that mothers were going to take their kids to the bus. And it was one of those things where it was like a split second. I mean, I really thought, George W. is never going to remember if I am at that luncheon. But my daughter is going to remember one way or another for probably the rest of her life. So I didn't go to the White House. I got a chance to go at another time. And that decision was an easy one. Have I missed a game? Yes. Have I missed the most important one? No. Have I missed a meeting at work? Yes. The most important one? No. So for me, it's just, making a decision like that and living with it.